The way that I got this game is because I bought it from a friend. This is someone who I knew at sixth form, and there's that word again, sixth. And if you don't know what sixth form is, it's basically the little bit of school that happens after you officially finish school. I don't know if there's an equivalent in other countries, but it's kind of like an extension to secondary school, but whatever. Basically what happened was he had this game and I wanted it, and he didn't care about the game at all, and I did, and so he said, I'll sell it to you, and I said, £15? And he was just like, yeah, as if to say, probably that's more than what he would have been willing to part with it for, but I figured it was low enough that I could give it a go and I didn't want to haggle anymore. But yeah, I bought it from him for £15 and boy, am I glad that I did, because this game here is an absolute fantastic example of depth in leveling systems, and given that alone, some of you are probably already aware of what I'm talking about, and for those of you that aren't aware of what I'm talking about, I am talking about Disgaea Hour of Darkness. Okay, so let's talk about how Disgaea works. It is what is commonly known as an SRPG or TRPG, which stands for Strategy or Tactical RPG, and I've probably gone into it already about how I think it's a bit of a misnomer to say that a grid means that a game is tactical or inherently strategic, but whatever. I am going to talk about the core concepts of the battle system. So all battles take place on a grid, and the way that the story works is that you basically progress through story events and then you enter a battle scene. And then you win the fight, and then you go back to your home base, which is your castle, and that is where you have access to shops and different modes and all that, and also you can just progress with the story. So you'll have like the first battle, then you'll leave, and then you can go back to the person who will send you to the next part of the story. You'll have another bit of story, and then you'll have a fight, then you'll leave. And this is how the game goes on and on until you reach the end of the story. But battles take place on a grid, but rather than having a preset number of characters that you have out and they all have a turn, instead what happens is you have a turn for your team of characters and then the enemy has a turn for their team of characters. And you have this area called the base panel, and you can use the base panel to deploy units out into the battle, and you can only have 10 units deployed at once, and if a character dies that will count as one of your units gone. And so you can deploy them and move them around and use an ability with them, whether that be just a regular attack, one of their special skills, or just defending. But once you've done everything, you can execute, so characters will just go ahead and do the thing that you've assigned them to do, that is their attack, defend, special ability, whatever, not the moving. And then you can end your turn once all that's done, and then the enemy has their turn and they do their thing, and so on and so forth. The base panel can also be used to capture enemies, so you can pick up enemies and throw them into the base panel, and then you'll have a chance of capturing that enemy as one of your own units. But throughout the levels you also have these things called geopanels, so you'll have these little tiles on the floor which are of a certain colour, and what that means is that any geopyramid that's on top of it, its effect will affect the entirety of that colour. So you might have a bunch of red panels with a blue pyramid on it, and the blue pyramid might say something like warp, which means if a character ends the turn on that panel then they will randomly teleport somewhere else on that same colour, or it might be damage, or it might be a strength boost, or it might be weakness to a particular element. And if you destroy one of these pyramids, then all of the panels that are of the colour that it's on will turn to the colour of the pyramid, and the idea is to build up a large chain and a big combo so that you can get loads of bonus items for when you complete the level. So you destroy a blue pyramid on top of the red panels and it will turn all of the red ones blue, and you want to build up a large chain so that as it's doing that, it is attacking all of the things on that colour. It will also destroy another pyramid of a different colour, and that is how you build up your bonus, which is how you get different items. Now, you can create characters. You have characters that are based on story-based characters, but you can create characters based on different battle roles, and as you use those different battle roles, they will gain ranks so that you can then create characters of a higher tier version of that role. So you'll have like the fighter, then you'll have access to the warrior, and different battle roles will give you access to different starting stats, and different aptitudes, which determines the rate of which they gain stats, as well as different effectiveness with different types of weapons, because each character has different weapon proficiencies with each type of weapon. So you might have one class that's very good with swords, but not very good with guns. And as you level up and use your different characters, they will gain mana, which is like this resource that you can use to buy different things, such as going to the Dark Assembly so you can propose bills to the senators to make enemies stronger and all sorts of things like that. And this includes transmigration, which later became known as reincarnation in the PSP version, but in the original version it's called transmigration. And basically this means that you can reset a character to level 1 and start leveling them up right from the start. But you carry over stats and abilities that you've learned from previous roles. And so this is how you eventually get really strong, by doing this a lot. And there is also the item world, in which you can jump inside items and level them up. And also there are different residents inside those items that you can subdue and move those around to different items to grant different bonuses to different stats and different effects, such as statisticians, which will increase your experience intake, and gladiators that will increase your attacking power. This game I borrowed from my brother. I never actually owned this game myself, but that's okay. I still had enough access to it that I was able to play it enough and to be able to thoroughly enjoy this game in particular. I'm not going to do a big build-up. I'm just going to tell you right now, this game is Disgaea 4, A Promise Unforgotten. So I previously just talked about Disgaea Hour of Darkness, and I in no way even scratched the surface with the depth of the mechanics, but that's okay because I've got Disgaea 4 here to sort of expand on that, because the core mechanics are basically the same. You still have the geo panels, you still have the reincarnation and the item world, but this will just allow me to go into some more detail whilst also explaining a few of the unique aspects of Disgaea 4. Two things that I think really make Disgaea 4 stand out in this regard is that, for one, it has a level editor and online play, so you can play other people's levels online, which, to be honest, I've never done that, but it's there. And also, one of the customization options for characters this time round is that you have this big grid, and the idea is that this is your kingdom, so to speak. And the more that you play the game, the more spaces are unravelled on this grid, and you put characters down, and you also put down monuments, and the monuments will grant different effects to the different characters based on where they are on the grid. So for example, you might put down this pyramid and it will have 3 spaces next to it that it will grant it something like recovers health periodically or something like that. I just made that up, but that's the general idea. But I'm going to go into more details right now about the item world and about reincarnation, because I think those are the two main Disgaea things that really need to be talked about. So reincarnation, I discussed in the first game that you spend mana to send your character back to level 1, and you can also, when doing this, choose to opt in to spend extra mana, and this will allow them to gain even more stats. So you put in the stats that you have, because the stats of the new character that you are creating when you reincarnate is based on the stats of the class that you are turning them into, that is if they are a non-story character, but also the stats that they had previously. So say if you had a character with loads of HP, then they would naturally start with a lot of HP. But also you get bonus stats that you can distribute into this character's different stats, because based on how many total levels that character has grown throughout every reincarnation cycle, that will determine how many points you can put in. And so I think it maxes at about 180,000 total levels or something like that. And by the way, I probably should have mentioned the maximum level in the Disgaea games is 9,999, which sounds like absolutely loads, and it is, but given the context of the games, just being that level isn't really all that much. And so a character with, say, 100 HP at level 1 and 50 SP at level 1 will grow HP twice as fast as SP, but then also you have to take into account their aptitudes, because their aptitude is basically a different modifier for leveling up, so it might be 110% or 55% or something if it's really low, and that also determines how fast those stats will grow. And so there's a lot of stuff that goes into it. Now, the item world, I'm going to expand on the item world here. The item world is this randomly generated dungeon that you can go into. You select an item and each item has its own residence and they start unsubdued. So you might have some physicians and a gladiator or something like that. And you progress through these randomly generated floors, and you can progress through the different floors to level up the item in question, and the higher the level, it increases the core stats of the item. So say you go into a sword and it has a lot of attack power, you can jump into the item and level it up, and that attack power will increase. And as you progress through these randomly generated floors, you will also come across the residents, and if you kill the residents, you will subdue them. And what a subdued resident is a doubly leveled resident to what it was before, but also now you can transfer it in between different items. So say you have a level 10 unsubdued gladiator, if you kill it, then it will become a level 20 subdued gladiator, and that level 20 subdued gladiator should increase the item's attack power by 20 points, but of course there's even more variations and modifiers to that. But you can also then take that gladiator and move it between different items, and you can also combine residents together, but combining them, such as combining two gladiators, will add their levels together, but it will also unsubdue them if there's a unsubdued resident of that type in that item. So generally you want to have some subdued residents of a particular type to then just combine them to make like a really powerful gladiator or whatever. There's loads of different types of residents, not just stat boosting ones that increase your resistances and elemental attacks, and ones that increase chances of events happening in the item world. It's absolutely crazy. And of course there's even more layers with the fact that each different type of weapon has its own rank as well. So you'll have a hierarchy of different swords and a hierarchy of different types of monster equipable weapons as well. And it's just so much stuff, just so much stuff. This is why I love this game. So, this game I got in 2015, and I got this because I had a lot of store credit for CEX, and I saw this game was selling for just £20, and I thought, £20? Yes, I'll get it. And my brother previously already had this game, but he had a digital copy, so I couldn't borrow it. And this game is, wait for it, Disgaea D2, A Brighter Darkness, and this is basically a story sequel to the first one, so you still have the same characters as the first one. And oh boy, we have our third Disgaea game in a row, and I was kinda worried that because I had a bunch of Disgaea games in a row that I wouldn't be able to spread out talking about all of these different games and the core Disgaea mechanics across them. But to be honest, there's so much to say about Disgaea, there's so much stuff, so much that I just love about them that, to be honest, I'm struggling to get enough information out there, but I'm just going to continue on talking about Disgaea. But I shall quickly, or at least attempt to quickly, talk about the unique features of Disgaea D2, and I will kind of have to rush them. One thing that they did is they added a dojo, so you can assign different characters different roles in the dojo, which will allow them to grow different stats at different rates. It's just yet another modifier to your leveling process, of which there is loads. Also, some of the features have been more streamlined, so if you want to change the difficulty of the enemies, change the enemy rank, you can just go to this character in the cheat shop, as it's called, to modify their rank rather than going to the Dark Assembly and having to vote for it every time. And I haven't even got into the details of the Dark Assembly. Jeez. And also this cheat shop, you can change different settings, like you can increase your experience gain to lower your money intake or mana intake and all that sort of stuff. But yes, let's talk about the Dark Assembly as quickly as I can, which is something throughout the entire series. The Dark Assembly is something that you go to when you spend your mana, and I briefly touched upon this when I talked about the first Disgaea game. And the way that this works is that you have a bunch of senators and you have to propose a bill, and they will say either aye or nay, and if there's more ayes than nays, then you pass the bill. Otherwise you don't. But if you don't, you can choose to fight them, and they are generally very strong. And if you can kill all of the enemies that disagree with you, then you can get the bill passed. And you can also affect the way that different senators vote by bribing them or giving them some alcohol so that they'll get drunk and not know what they're wanting to vote for. And all sorts of different crazy stuff like that. There are also different modifiers for the item world this time, so you can change like the size of the item world and different amount of geopanels and stuff. Everything I said about Disgaea 1 and 4 still apply, with the whole reincarnation system and aptitude and all of that. But I'm going to talk about a few more details about the different characters' stats, including the different stats of their weapon proficiencies, because not only does each character have weapon proficiency, they also have a weapon level that they level up. So a character may be an S rank with bows, but if they haven't used bows, they haven't leveled it up, and so they might actually end up being better with swords because you used swords with them more. One of the unique features of Disgaea D2, because I did Platinum Disgaea D2, one of the unique features about Disgaea D2 is the Land of Carnage mode. And I know Land of Carnage mode isn't a new thing, but the way that it works in this game in particular is that if you are playing in Land of Carnage mode, all the enemies are loads more powerful. But if a character kills an enemy in Land of Carnage mode, they get a very, very small percentage of their stats as Land of Carnage bonus. Yet another modifier. But if you have a character with Land of Carnage bonus, those stats are set in stone and permanent, and those stats can never ever go down. Because usually when you reincarnate a character back to level 1, all their stats go down, but they're affected by their stats when you reincarnated them and all that. But no, these Land of Carnage bonus stats, if you have a character with 1,000,000 HP in their Land of Carnage bonus, you can turn them into the weakest thing possible. They will have an extra 1,000,000 HP. It can get that crazy. But also in this game, they also streamlined the New Game Plus feature, because usually when you complete the game and defeat the final boss, you get sent back to the beginning of the game, carrying over all of your character's stats and abilities and all that. And this is how you accommodate for all the missables throughout the game. And this is again a general Disgaea thing. And I realise I'm kind of talking sporadically here, just talking about points here and points there, but I just have to get all this information out somehow. And there's no way I'll be able to give you a full overview of these games in this time. No way. And that's one of the things I just love about these games. What else is there to touch upon? Oh yes, another general Disgaea thing as well is that items that you get will have a certain rarity to them. And a rarity determines a few things, but for one, it determines the amount of flaws in the item world for that level. Or for that item rather. So for example, a legendary weapon, and it's not like a particular type of sword is legendary, it's just like a random variable to a particular thing. Like you can have some chewing gum, that's legendary, and that means that there are more flaws in the item world to go to, so that you can level it up even further. And another thing about the item world as well is that the way that you exit the item world is by either using a Mr. Jency's exit, which you can use it at any time to leave the item world, but also you can leave the item world at every multiple of 10 levels. And if you defeat all the enemies on every multiple of 10 levels, you will get a Mr. Jency's exit. So there's that. Each multiple of 10 levels you'll also have like an item captain or item, some sort of high tier enemy, where like if it's at the top of a legendary item, you'll have the item god where you can possibly steal like the legendary, not legendary, like the top tier weapons and all that. And my goodness, Disgaea man, there's just so much to talk about. I just love these games.